Okay, hello everybody. Ooh, I'm sweating.
We've been getting warmed up.
Yeah,
Nice.
this is my wonderful friend, fellow human, Matt Mulligan, coming live from Manchester, England. Um,
Hello.
Matt, dear brother, it's lovely to have you on, and
Good to be here, man. I hope that by the end of our conversation, you can find something better than fellow human that links us. For the level of intimacy we've enjoyed at times, I would hope that we can find something else there. But we'll keep it rolling, man. We'll keep it rolling.
okay, we won't start again. We'll keep that as the intro.
Yeah. Honesty, man. Keep it.
No, but you are yeah, I must say we've only shared short quantity of time, but the depth and the quality is truly yeah, is humbling, and I
And
always
just to like clarify, practically speaking, that was I can't even be sure that I have it right in my mind, but we met in Berlin for some time when I was working with Tom, and then again in Costa Rica. And is it actually those two patches that
that's
we've
it. I
enjoyed
think,
physical company? Wow. Okay.
and a few phone calls here and there, and um so yeah, just to let people know, and I mean they can read about you as much as they want, but Matt is um, a movement artist, a teacher, facilitator, with a kind of very strong connection and emphasis to nature, and just general good vibrations. And I was in search of
Sponsored
those.
by the Beach Boys, incidentally. I'm still holding out for that sponsorship with the Beach Boys. They'll cave. If I stay on it, they'll cave.
So I was in search of those good vibrations, and was in Berlin, and this was 2018. Yeah, 2018. And met Matt there, and we had a pretty instantaneous connection. And there's good memories from that time. But yeah, I would say the
I was also injured. I remember, I think I injured myself on or around the day we met. So
the
I
ankle.
I was desperate. I was wide open for connection. I was, I was
It was the ankle, but actually, I remember you actually apologized to me because you were like, because I came up to you and I was like, "Are you okay, dude? Like, do you want to, like, can I help in any way?" And you were like, "I'm fine."
yeah. You were probably finding me in one of my like Rocky Balboa like last rounds before the fight ends, when he's just like he feels like he needs to rely on himself and himself alone. It was probably in one of those phases there. It
Totally.
happens from time to time. I've got
Yeah.
the rhythm of it.
Yeah. And I was like, "No, man, I totally get it. It's all good. Do your thing. You know your body. You know yourself. Do what you got to do."
Well, it's not the time you choose to meet a mate, really, is it? Just like in the midst of physical pain and mental disturbance. I
Yeah.
was probably like, come back later. Come back later. This
Yeah.
isn't
Or it's the best time. Or it's the best time mostly.
true. Fair, yeah. And I think if we're finding anything in the pandemic, it's the vulnerable times are honest, at least. Boom. There you go. There you go.
The obstacle is the way.
Does this mean you've got a series of like you've got a props table lined
Yeah.
up? Are you just ready to grab at any moment?
I'm not going to show it to you, but
Yeah, yeah. Depending on where the conversation might go, you've
I've
got
just
something for me.
that's it.
Great.
Um, but yeah, dude, I mean, we could go on about our personal things, but that's not entirely why we're here. We're trying to, I guess, we want to. Well, we enjoy facilitating spaces, conversations that hopefully there's some kind of objectivity that can be explored. And I guess what we could start with is, you know, I know a bit about your history, but not really. What would you say was like a dawning moment that kind of sparked the movement or the meditation or the mindful movement or whatever you want to call it, this kind of this
Yeah.
awakening to
So, I think with these things, I think my personal preference is actually, like, as you've identified there, is to think in terms of key moments with this stuff, because I think it's really, speaking for myself, it's really possible to get into that mentality of, well, I did like chronological background, I did
sure.
this and that led to that, but it's just not really true to my experience that that's what keeps you in something. You know, I really think that there's key moments that, yeah, that speak to you on a deeper level, and that's when, I don't know, you know, that's when you make those decisions to be like, right, I'm going to invest in this way of living. And to be really honest with you, I can't pinpoint a huge number of moments for that in terms of physical movement, because I'd always stayed, like, from a young age, I'd stayed like very physically engaged. But I dove hard as a teenager. I dove hard into Chinese martial arts, and that for me was, I'm very grateful to that kind of entry point to the body and physical practice, because in the particular, you know, the Chinese martial arts I was studying then, there was so much emphasis on well, body mind, not, you know, not mind body disconnection, but the sense of it was just taken as par for the course that whatever you were going to be working with mechanically in the body had some some resonance elsewhere in the mind, in life, or however you want to put that. And I'm really grateful, because I think I was very receptive at that age. And I might, you know, who knows, if I'd got into basketball or something, I might have just taken wholesale a very mechanical way of thinking. But actually it felt that my initiation into intense physical practice was really offered as a kind of a way of life choice, rather than a right, so, you know, you do this for this number of hours and get this result. And that was, yeah, I'm really grateful for that. And then I suppose the other thing you mentioned that, you know, is obviously a strand and a theme that we share is the meditation. And that that interest, let's say, that dawned, that there was a lot more of a key moment with that one, insofar as when I was I was in my early 20s, and I'd been kind of flirting with meditation in quite gentle ways for some time. And I mean, with, you know, all of the sort of bells and smells. I was basically just trying on my first hippie persona. And as we know, that doesn't come without a healthy dose of meditation. So I was, you know, I was kind of very much flirting with that. And then I met a very dear friend of mine who I was working with at circus school. I was attending a circus school at the time, and a guy who was very inspiring to me, grew to be a very close friend, and we worked together for a number of years. He basically just said, look, I've been sitting a number of these meditation retreats, and I think you'd buzz off it. And it was just coming from such a loving, authentic place that I really had the sense that I just couldn't say no. I was like, this great guy who I've got a lot of love for is saying, I think you'd enjoy this. I had time on my hands. I thought, I'm gonna go all in with this. And then signed up for a Vipassana meditation retreat, which, to give a little context, is it's a kind of 10-day silent meditation retreat, very monastic way of living. I basically think of it as meditation boot camp. You know, it's like right, if you've been flirting with it, let's come in, go hard, and get in. And that for me was a really soulful, restful, authentic experience. And I remember that, I remember this moment, like maybe 6 days into a course, where I just recognized that in my life up to that point, in 2 decades of living, I had never gone quiet enough to actually notice that, that internal chatter that is, it's like I'd never taken the wallpaper off, to see what was underneath. I just took that as the background. And that really just put me in touch with something that I felt had to be part of my life moving forward. And, as you'll be able to relate to, and I'm sure anyone who listens to this, who's been in their early 20s, that sort of intense way of living at that time, it's very easy to go all in with something. And I then did that. I went from flirting with meditation to being like, I'm in, man, let's go. And then that, I suppose, that relationship has just continued to mature in various ways over the year. And now I consider the balance of meditation and movement to be, to be completely honest, I think the separation of the two is linguistic more than anything else.
Yeah.
But I try and make that a kind of key part of what I offer now. Yeah. Wow, I've gone on at you there, man.
No, it's lovely, man. We're here to listen. That's what it's about. Yeah, I can definitely resonate with the kind of extreme early 20s behavior.
Why do it 100% when you can go 1,000%?
Yeah, exactly. So, but now another thing, because I personally haven't done, like a full Vipassana experience. I've done a lot of, time in silence, in isolation, in in minimalistic environments, but I haven't done like the structured Vipassana experience. But one thing that I know we've spoken a bit about, and is being having time alone in nature specifically, where, like you said, Vipassana is a very kind of specific process. And like you said, it's kind of like a meditation boot camp. But I've found, I've spent a couple days by myself in the mountains with, no phone or, something like that, comfortable, not like, oh, I'm like picking my own food or whatever. Like I'm staying in a little cottage.
Yeah,
but
you had your team, you had a 12-person caravan. Oh, yeah. You had your, you had your inflatable hot tub. But...
Yeah, totally. But
I hear you, man.
But yeah, that's been a big thing for you. Is it something that you kind of grew up with, or?
No, I'm really glad you brought. I'm glad you brought this in, man, because I'm fascinated by. I'm really intrigued and curious and fascinated by other ways into similar interests, because the one sort of, I suppose, a downside of this highly rigorous, intense introduction to certain ways of living, because for me it came in that structured packaging. I found it difficult to relate to other ways that you might find your way in. And over the years, I've just met increasing numbers of people who have found let's call it a meditation and movement practice. People who have found their way into something there from a very gentle, very intuitive path. And that fascinates me, because yeah, it just wasn't my journey. It wasn't my journey. And as a result, I'm like, I'm really curious to know about that process. Like in some ways, I feel that like I've been on maybe something of a reverse where it started hardcore and I've actually been navigating some way of like, of unpicking a degree of that to
Mm,
then, you know, bring in and allow space for that. But, you know, to be honest with you, when I was, you know, in early 20s to mid 20s, I was just really into the idea of like you know you go away and you meditate, and if you're doing that, then do that fully, and that's what it is. And these days, you know, as you've mentioned, I spend a lot more time. I think time in silence on your own is super valuable, you know, just for being in that way. But my context of it now does happen more in nature, and that, you know, I feel very fresh to the game, to be truthful, in that sense. I feel like that's a very exciting place for me, for which the novelty really still hasn't worn off, if that
mm.
makes
Well, and
sense.
hopefully it never does. But, you know, maybe. Hopefully it's always fresh.
Yeah, well,
Um,
I'm pretty certain that the decision for most of humanity to lock themselves in their own homes for a fair portion of time will be developing a consistent long-term thirst for that, man. So I'm
mm,
certainly not scared of that really going anywhere.
mm. So the choice of kind of unpicking, or your choice of word with unpicking, and like kind of the idea of being exposed to these kind of very rigorous structured methods, or approaches, is definitely something that I went through, particularly with movement, you know. And when I
Mm,
reflect on it, it's really how I've experienced most of my learning, particularly at school, and kind of all my conditioning. I would say, okay, I can't say all of it, but if I was to like estimate a figure, I'd say like 70 to 80% of all the learning that I've done in my life was very much about do this, do it like this is how it's done. And maybe 20 to 30% of it, like, what do you think? You know,
okay.
approach it. How would you approach this? You know, and particularly then after school with like movement, I was very drawn to very like, what is the right way? What's the traditional way? What's the, you know, what's this method? What's this system? And like, I want to do it exactly like that. And as the teacher says, and it again, I feel like it created quite a lot of separation and tension within myself, and within when I would meet other people who were doing their thing, and this whole like, I just very immature clash of like, oh well, we do it this way, you know, so and
Oh,
our way is the way, you know. And um slowly but surely, I think maybe it's like a mixture of just doing the practices, and then holding on to some kind of like freshness that for me, I feel every human has access to. Like if you think back to certain memories as a child and growing up, of like a sense of wonder, of like, whoa, man, what is this all about? You know, like, who am I? What am I? Why are we here? You know, no, every human has that, even if it's for like a faint 10 seconds of just looking at the stars, or I don't know, watching The Lion King, whatever, man. Like,
yeah.
and 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 I've kind of found myself now, thanks to, and I truly do mean this, to, well, to all my teachers, but to the teachers who have inspired a, a little bit more of like a bit more of an open approach, and a bit more of kind of a curious approach and a playful approach and an open approach, that was void of the kind of dogma that I grew up with, at a Catholic school. Um, and then that I kind of found again that same similar dogma within certain spiritual practices and traditions. And
I hear that, man.
and for me, it's been like a peeling, you know, and like you said, you know, taking off the wallpaper, looking at the conditioning, trying not to judge it, just kind of to see it for and what it is, and to kind of get to some kind of, you know, some kind of center in a way, or some kind of neutral ground, or some kind of objectivity, which is why you know, for me, the kind of question of original condition, and I haven't even spoken about this in any of the podcasts, so I'm glad it's kind of coming up. And with what you're sharing and what you know, what you call body roots, there is this sense of, you know, like, who am I without all of the stuff, you know? So I don't know if there's a question there, but
I hear you absolutely. I just wanted to. It's just so nice to hear what you're expressing. So I didn't want to ruin your flow, but I completely. I hear where you're coming from, man, and I think there's like some. For me, speaking for myself, there's some like quite subtle and important points in what you've mentioned there, because like, structure is comforting, right? Okay, so I think the urge to gravitate towards structure I think that's quite a natural human impulse. You know, I think to actually move in the direction of things and people who appear to know what they're doing is really actually healthy. And yet, at the same time, to become obsessive in that space is disempowering, ultimately, you know? So I think this conversation and this balance between being able to ask whether a structure is serving me is a really healthy one. But the idea that we should kind of throw the baby out with the bathwater and kind of be like, right, I only touch unstructured practices that let me be me. I don't think this is actually, I don't even think it's possible, really, because we need, you know, we need to be, to perhaps find that thirst for, let's call it self-created structure, to find that thirst for something that is like, right, what does Matt want? What does Dave want? I think you can only find that in conversation with other pre-existing structures, you know. But I do think that there is the mature possibility of finding structures that might come from, they might be self-created or they might come from other people, which put you in touch with a process of finding something true to you. So again, working with our mutual friend Tom Weksler, that was a wonderful process of many years for me, because I felt that you know, I found somebody who was putting out there a structured, clear offering, the objective of which was to put me in touch with myself as an artist. And in that way, it felt like a very clear balance of empowering, you know, like personally empowering, but structured. And I think the trap that it's possible to fall into, and I've certainly did it. I did it for a period with contact improvisation in my mid-20s, where I was like, I'm done with being told what to do. I'm done with the structures. And I think, man, we live in a world that is inherently structured. You know, there's always going to be that creation of things. Perhaps a more empowering question is whether or not the structures that are currently operating in our lives are serving us, rather than having this oscillation between obsessive with highly obsessed with structure, and then I need completely unstructured time.
Yeah.
It reminds me of how I was when I was at the dance school. I had to I went into exactly that oscillation with diet, where I was like, so one day a week I have unstructured time where I'll let myself eat whatever whatever I'd like to. And the rest of the time I've got this quite, you know, like healthy way of doing, you know, I get to a Friday morning and it's before breakfast and I'm like, cool, 6 Mars bars, let's go. And that oscillation between structured and unstructured, I think it's very easy to get that round our necks in quite a kind of adolescent way. But hey, I guess this is how we learn also.
Totally, man. Yeah, I think a big discernment maybe is then my kind of seeing the difference between dogma and structure. And I think that was my experience as well, like wanting to break free of what I think was dogma, to be honest. It had, the structure was too strong, and maybe my nature, slightly neurotic, too sensitive, becoming obsessed and like, oh, am I doing it right? And then this need to break away from it to experience some kind of personal freedom. And then realizing that would be very short-lived, and I would then soon find myself in a kind of depressive state, you know, like completely in an illusion of like, what is freedom, and like what do we need to live and to survive well. And like, I think that's the thing is finding that some kind of balance, because nature is incredibly chaotic, not in a negative sense, and is incredibly destructive, again, not in a negative sense. It's just what it does. And to have evolved for billions of years, to find a way that is creating some kind of order, some kind of structure out of that chaos, is such a beautiful thing. And that's why we can see morality in animals. You know, we can see communication, understanding of fairness, understanding of compassion and kindness and empathy in, you know, particularly in primates, and within ourselves. And it's like, okay, cool. So like there's a need for, you know, there's a need for structure. Otherwise I'm just blowing in the wind, you know, and I'm just like going with the flow. And there's no grounded sense of like being reliable, you know.
Oh man, I'll hop in there, man, because
Yeah,
I've got
sure.
something to bring to the party here, because I totally agree. The thing for me that's interesting is that nature is in a constant state of dynamic balance. I like to think of it like dynamic balance. It's something whereby balance is consistently being found by swaying into imbalance. It's like balance is being found by going too far one way, too far the other way. And in that respect, you know, let's use a physical analogy, as we're both physical people, but this sense, you know, in a handstand, like the idea of a static balance point in a handstand, for me, it's not true to my experience. Like in a handstand, I find a dynamic balance, which is me consistently off balance, off balance, off balance. And I get better and better at finding micro shifts of weight, which keep me into a dynamic balance. But that is a conversation, you know, it's not like, right, cool, I've got it here, and now I just hold, stop everything. And, you know, in the same way, we don't see in nature anything go, right, cool, okay, we've got it just right now, we hold. It's constantly changing. But this is where I think we have to be a little bit careful in drawing generalizations between nature and human practices, say of meditation, of movement, of nearly anything. Because I speak for myself and you speak for yourself, and any human is going to bring their own personal perspective to things. So something that I might find highly dogmatic and really just not the thing that I need, it might be serving exactly the purpose it needs for somebody else, you know, in that sense. And even I think even to find a kind of objective difference between dogma and structure, I don't think that's a healthy road to be on, because, you know, one man's structure is another man's dogma.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think we're going to get past that. But actually a sort of question of, dynamic balance, I find really helpful, because it just takes out of that idea of, I've got this, I've got it, and it's right forever. You know, it's right for now, and that's enough.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's what so many of the movement practices brought out in me. They brought out the control freak, you know, to like an absolute maximum, like must get it, you know, like have to be exactly as like that, you know, and then I swung to the complete opposite of this, like craving for whatever you want to call it, open form, free form, you know, movement, with no rules and then like being stuck in that for a while, and then like, like there needs to be some kind of dynamic balance. There needs to be some kind of meeting between these polarities. And that's so cool. Like, that's so beautiful that we can go to these polarities, and experience them, and then find and explore everything in between.
I'd be really interested to know how that relates to your experiences as a teacher, because something for me that I've enjoyed and learned a lot from is the fact of choosing to take on the responsibility of holding and creating space for other people. That is a role in which I'm obliged to offer structure of a certain kind, not even, you know, not necessarily to achieve a particular result, but just to create, you know, a place in which somebody feels safe. You know, there has to be a kind of baseline level of structure that is present. In the same way, you know, you have a new baby, you make sure you have a house. There's like certain structures that I think we do need to just feel safe and comfortable in that way. But I'd be interested to hear your experience, you know, speaking from that passion for more open form. I'd be interested to know what your approach is to creating structure that keeps people open to, you know, an open form practice.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, dude, isn't that one of the big questions?
Maybe,
um,
yeah, give me the full solution in maybe 4 or 5 words.
okay. I don't know. No, I think it's like, again, like you're saying, everyone's bringing their own thing to the table, right? Their own background. If we're talking about movement specifically, you know, maybe some people are, and that's what's so interesting about this whole movement culture trend that's popped up. I think it's always been there, but it's just become, maybe because of social media and the internet over the past 10 years, it's just been amplified. And so I find, you know, people are coming from their various different backgrounds, or no background really, which is a background in itself. But and they'll bring that to the table, you know. So the Ashtanga yogis are bringing this kind of vibe. The dancers are bringing that kind of vibe. The martial artists are bringing that kind of vibe, and that's really cool. And that's so awesome, because what a great melting pots for exchange and learning. But personally, what I've been trying to do and figure out is, how do we acknowledge those things, but allow for a space where maybe we can explore what is the common thread of those things. So it's like the body, the mind, the breath. You know, how can we minimalize it as much as possible to just kind of, again, make it almost as objective as possible. And it's like, oh, I've got a body, I've got a breath, I've got a voice in my head, I've got a way to look and feel. And that's where I think the meditation is, for me, is like it's like the keystone, it's the foundation, you know, because that really is allowing each individual to experience the way they perceive themselves, their body, their breath, their mind, and giving them those opportunities to observe and witness themselves. And that, I think, is a good starting point. So it's like a simultaneous acknowledgement of like, okay, you've got your own background, you do your thing, you come from, you know, or you don't, and you're wanting to just begin. And that's where I think it's not even about the movement. It's about like, let's it's what I call like relative stillness, because we're never going to be perfectly still. But let's see and feel what the body and the breath and the mind and the senses do just by themselves. And like, for me, that opens up a world of opportunity, man. It's like, all of a sudden, I'm you know, I'm not in the driver's seat exactly, but I'm a lot more aware of these processes, which then I can steer in the way that you know, I kind of choose to. And that's very liberating.
Totally, man. I hear that absolutely. There's something, just while you were speaking then, something kind of arose in me that is this sense of, what would you call it? Finding that kind of, listen, like, if I'm not gonna, like, again, I'll speak for myself because I can't talk for anybody else, but my default experience has been that I operate in living my life, in moving the way I move, in all of my relationships, I operate as a baseline from the conditioned mind. You know, I just bring my background with me wherever I go. So like the default for me as a human being has been, you know, I wake up in the morning, the conditioned mind switches on, and if I let it, it's gonna run the whole show until I go to sleep again. Now, meditation for me was the process of seeing that there, you know, my kind of introduction to meditation was that fascinating, liberating question of, well, maybe there's something else. Maybe there's another way. And let's call that, you know, to borrow your kind of terminology, original condition. I think of that as the original condition, like the unconditioned mind, say. And I think that can be hugely empowering for people with who are interested in movement, because actually it's very possible to make a life obsessed with movement that is run by the conditioned mind. So again, I'll speak for myself. A lot of my I'd say the first 15 years of my diving in a strong way into physical practice was motivated by a deep-seated fear that I wasn't enough, that I couldn't, you know, and that I would finally find the way to be if I could just do that skill, or if I could just achieve this this level of physicality. And that, for me, shows that, again, speaking only for myself, movement is just as possible for me to become obsessed with from the conditioned mind. That's another framework that I can attach things to and bring all of that, you know, that conditioned baggage with. So you know, I really resonate with what you're saying, because for me, that has had to be the solution, to be asking questions, and I call this sphere the meditative aspect, asking questions first about the basics. What are the absolute basics? You know, what's the thinking mind? What's beyond that? And then everything to do with my, the mechanics of my body and a movement practice, they have to build on a base of that. That, however, is all, you know, that's me speaking for me. I've met, you know, many people, like my partner included, who they seem to have been able to find their way to a sense of very genuine being, experience of the unconditioned mind through primarily a movement practice. But that it just wasn't my journey, so I can't really comment on it. But I think there's there's valid journeys both ways. But I wholeheartedly that I think if the set kind of end destination isn't the unconditioned mind, I think we're in for a life of more suffering than needs be.
Exactly. Which kind of in to just go on a little bit about it, in my like question or proposition of original condition, I'm like, well, you know, the way I see it is an original condition is not like inclusive or sep, you know, it's taking in all of this possibility, you know. It's almost something that you can't define somewhat. But to bring back what you were saying, like because I had a very similar thing. What was the word you used? You said it's a sense of worth, a sense of value. So for me, I definitely struggled with this idea that like I have to look a certain way. And I've gone through phases in my life where I've been like, I wouldn't say severely, but I don't know what's the word before severely, like pretty overweight, you know, like I've been like unhealthy, you know, and through various different points in my life. And I had a massive realization that through these like certain movement practices, I was feeding into this narrative that like I wanted to look a certain way. And there's a lot of psychological baggage around that. And if I didn't address that, it would keep perpetuating this narrative that I have. And it's like a double-edged sword with the movement. It's like it was the thing that was simultaneously releasing me, but it was the thing that was also keeping the story going. And through the movement, it led to that introspective moment. And in that introspective moment, I was like, well, maybe I should be doing more introspection. And maybe that should be like I said, the bedrock or the keystone or the foundation of the practice needs to be meditation, mindfulness, awareness, self-study, introspection, whatever word you want to use. That needs to be the origin. And then I can steer and I can come back at any time, you know. And I might go on a bit of a tangent, but I'm aware that I'm on a tangent. I will go, yeah. And then I'm going to bring it back. And I think I caused a lot of damage to myself. Damage, not like irreversible damage, but I caused suffering. I had to, and I had to go through that suffering to learn those lessons, which ruined certain relationships and ruined certain friendships. But I don't really see any other way of how it would have happened. You know, so to bring it full circle, it's like I'm doing my best as I can without trying to sound like an absolute pretentious douchebag to facilitate that space, you know, without trying to project my story onto it too much. And like, okay, here's a kind of somewhat of a neutral ground where we can all acknowledge ourselves and our backgrounds and our conditioning, but maybe there's something else that we can also explore. And allowing the simultaneous freedom and structure within that, and how the freedom can inform the structure and how the structure can inform the freedom. And so I'll wrap it up on this last point. I have found personally a lot of freedom in the structures of the body, like as they are. Like the arm does this, the spine does this, the breath does this. Like instead of like trying to make the body do something.
That you've nail on the head for me there, brother. Because like for me, and the need is for common ground. Okay, as in, you know, if we, and the body is common ground. I've never met anybody who didn't have a body, and as a result, there's like that sense of there's that sense of potential there to, yeah, you know, to both acknowledge personal experience and at the same time have a dialogue about universal experience. There's this, there's a quote that I love, and I'm going to embellish it, I'm sure, but from Alan Watts, legendary Zen philosopher, but he has this wonderful phrase where he says that, you know, like the best way to raise children would be to bring them into the world and say to them, so you're going to see all of us grown-ups playing certain games, and we're going to teach you those games with the hope that you can design some better ones. But what we actually do is basically say, welcome, these are the games, motherfucker. You know, and in that way, I really try and I really enjoy, like I've loved listening to what you're sharing there, because it feels like perhaps we're trying to find a similar way in what we're sharing or offering, to find how we can yeah, create games or spaces which they are structured. Of course there's structure there. It's the only way we can communicate, and nonetheless they create a space to somehow go beyond that.
Yeah, and I think maybe there's some nice things that we can explore a bit there. One being, well, Alan Watts being someone who really suffered strongly, you know, and was very open about it. And in the end, a lot of people don't know how Alan Watts died, but it's like highly, just a fascinating human being who, you know, like was very open about the contradictory nature of being, you know. But not to go too much about Alan Watts, people can check that out in there, because it is quite interesting
and do I don't want anyone listening to this who isn't immediately navigating to YouTube and Alan Watts.
Yeah.
Maybe some kind of waiver that people signed. It's like guarantee I will be Alan Watts. Yeah.
But no, something really important you said there was oh, don't go blank, it's slipping from me.
Well, what, man? While you
the universals, which has been an incredibly interesting topic over the past this year, due to the for the first time in our generation, you know, and pretty much since the kind of Spanish flu, the entire planet experiencing a shared, you know, experience.
there's a guaranteed universal right now. There's a guaranteed universal, which is as simple as you and I share the fact of being in a pandemic. And you know, as we were having a brief conversation about before now, I think that sense of being in a time which is where everybody's suffering is to a lesser or greater extent on the surface, actually creates a real opportunity for more authenticity, which does not mean more, you know, more pleasantness. But I think we're, you know, undeniably we're in a hard time now. And again, like personally speaking, I think if you're alive, if you have a heartbeat and you're breathing, you'll be suffering sooner or later. That is part of how things seem to go. I think the idea of trying to get away from suffering forevermore while you're a human being is just that's not the game we're playing here. Yeah. But being alive in a time when the suffering is quite pronounced in an objective way, when we can communicate about that, I think there's a lot of capacity for special things to happen right now. And again, like my personal relationships, both in terms of my friendships, my family relations, they feel like they've leveled up in this time. But not only them, also just, you know, like smaller interactions, neighbors, my students, because there's like this guaranteed level of realness that everyone is bringing to the party now. Is like, how are you? Really? What's the bad shit you're dealing with right now?
Yeah, like you said, and maybe we will make that the title of the podcast, which is something I grapple with. But like you said it in when we were chatting earlier, like maybe for the first time, actually saying "How are you?" you know, is actually genuine and maybe has a bit of depth to it, and like, because it's like, you know.
Yeah, somewhere right now, everyone's got a huge steaming pile of turd in their life somewhere, whether it's that they're homeschooling their kids, whether it's that their mother has just passed away, whether it's their business has collapsed, even if the individual is fine, someone in their family isn't, you know. We're all in this collective experience of grief and suffering right now. What does that mean? You can say like, right, how you doing?
Yeah. So something then, even on like a bigger and global scale, and I you know, in terms of universals, and something I've said, I've said this in every podcast now, and like people are like, oh, Dave's gonna say the thing again. The 10 people that watch it, thank you. With small steps, but
Dave's universals. I'm psyched for this. Yeah.
But you know, this is, and a lot of people have said it in many different ways, but so the pandemic has leveled the playing field, but what it's done is also revealed how unlevel the playing fields are, you know what I mean? And the games, like you said, that are being played, and it's bringing about this authenticity about certain matters that is completely very uncomfortable for a lot of people. I think what I wanted to get to was something that I don't see it as the most important matter, but I kind of feel like it is. And I know I've seen you hopping around in your, if I remember correctly, it was a kangaroo suit at the Extinction Rebellion protests. We've got all this shit going on, and it's been going on for a long, long time on this planet. And humans have done terrible things, particularly mine and your heritage. We've done some wonderful things, and we've done some really terrible things, which at the time people thought were wonderful. But to get to even something that is like, again, common ground, hopefully, because the pandemic has created such polarization, which is such a hot topic at the moment, and it's great that it is. I'm like, what unifies us? Okay. Not to have this kind of idealistic, airy fairy, like we're all one thing, but we are on a giant rock.
Yeah. Not to build utopia, just to stop us killing ourselves.
There we go. We go. We are on a giant rock flying through space that is incredibly delicate and always has been, and could change at any moment due to the nature of the cosmos. But it's like, there are certain things that we need to be doing as a species if we even want to carry on, you know, dealing with the shit that we need to deal with.
Totally. Yeah. But here, man, is where I think that like to be in touch with the body is to be uniquely placed to make empowering change. And again, I don't say this to preach, I just say it to share something that I enjoy. But like, it doesn't feel realistic to me to be incapable, if I'm not capable of looking after this earth, this home, this body, I don't feel it's going to be possible to extend that any wider to look at. So like, you know, the idea that if I'm not looking after my own experience in this body, I'm probably not looking after my home, as in my actual house. If I'm not looking after my house, I'm probably not looking after my neighborhood. If I'm not looking after my neighborhood, and it goes out to country, to continent, to world, I think that being in contact in a meaningful way with the body is actually our fastest and most empowering solution to the damage that we're doing as a species on the planet. I think, yeah, and I'll be vulnerable and put that right out there as my kind of personal hippie manifesto. But I truly believe that, and that was one of the motivations for the title of the work that I offer, Body Roots. I think we need to find a way to be rooted first in the body, and let's say, in the senses, in our own experience of consciousness, before we're then going to make any change out there. And I also think that if you are seeking change out there without having this taken care of, I don't think it comes from the best place.
Well,
But,
that's what
the
I'm very...
mindfulness idol, Eckhart Tolle, I absolutely love his work. He says, whatever you do, do it with peace in your heart. And that for me is the nail on the head. Because if I'm going to run around participating in activism, conscious change, but it's all coming from this place of, fuck, it needs to change now, I'm probably not taking care of something that I need to.
Yeah, and that brings us back to that what we were talking about earlier, of like, the narrative, the conditioning that we all have. I felt like, and I don't see any other way of how it would have happened, but I feel like and I hope in a couple of years' time, if we have this conversation again, or a couple months' time, I'm like, oh, Matt, remember when I said that thing? I actually was still doing that thing. But what I mean is, like, I feel like the
do you remember when we nearly fried the world, Dave? Do you remember when we were all, oh, thank God we turned that ship around? Yeah.
But I feel like is like the first 5 to maybe even longer years of like intensive practice around trying to understand what the body and the mind was, I feel like for me was coming from that deep space of fear and confusion and lack, and everything that I was doing was very, very much overcompensation. We're never going to be these perfect, like absolutely functioning cyborgs, which is kind of funny, because that's what we're kind of creating with AI, which is hilarious. And I want to get into that topic with you, because something you said just now, in terms of, you said we don't want to save ourselves, we just want to stop, what did you say, destroying ourselves? How did you phrase it?
Oh, gone now, man.
Yeah. Anyway, but let me don't go on that tangent. I'm tangenting it too much. But yeah, I felt like a lot of the stuff that I was doing was coming from a space of fear, even though my intention was to learn. And well, that's the thing, my intention was to learn and grow, but my actions weren't matching my intentions for a long time. And I could criticize myself, and people could criticize me and say, well, Dave, they're still not. But like, I just remember being like overcompensating a lot.
I think, man, that maybe that's a human factor, as in, like, as in the journey, my journey of it. Like, I wouldn't have it any other way, because I wasn't capable at the time of operating by a different route. And in the same way, I think, like, if you've got a human child, that they're going to get to a teenage point at some point, a kind of like adolescent like phase, where they're gonna fuck loads of shit up. They're gonna like they're gonna make a bit of a mess in various ways, emotionally, physically, all of this. It's kind of part of the development process that you get it all wrong, and then retrospectively look back at how you were getting it wrong, and then make choices to get it right moving forward. Like, that is learning. But my question is whether or not, where we're at on the species level now is whether we can learn in time. Because it does feel that, you know, the stakes are high now. It feels like we're at a point where actually, you know, the human experiment is at a point where it's all in, with a sense of, cool, we might be gambling our actual future on this planet. You know, nature's going to be fine, man. We're not in danger of wiping out nature. That's going to be here. Yeah, you know, moving forward till the sun goes out, that's going to be taking care of itself. The question is like whether the human species now can learn in time.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think just to like put an empowering spin on that, I really do hold out a lot of hope and optimism, because I think there is, like, in the body, I think there are intuitive ways of being, which if we can get in touch with them, with ourselves, we can bring it to a collective level much easier. I mean, like, I just had this experience the other day and it was really beautiful, but you know, I've started getting, I haven't been in running shape for a long time. So I've started a sprinting practice just to feel some of that energy in my life again. And I noticed that every Thursday when I come back after my sprints, like, there's no way in hell I want any sort of shit food. I just don't want fast food, junky stuff. I just, you know, your whole body is like, whoa, no, not for me, man. Not what I'm feeling. And yet at other times I can find myself, you know, like munching on whatever crap I have to hand. And I think here there's a sense in which it's like, if we get ourselves in touch with the body in the right way, there's an intuitive intelligence for what is good for us. And if I do think if enough of us are doing that, I think there's reason for a great deal of optimism.
For sure. So, I don't know if you've watched The Social Dilemma.
No, man, no. Yeah, I mean,
it's nothing you don't already know. And I know we've had a lot of, you know, conversations around social media and the internet, and it's definitely worth a watch. I would highly recommend it. And they're saying the same thing, you know. They're like, basically the majority of the people that they're interviewing, they run something called the Center for Humane Technology. And you know, a lot of like you said earlier, the saying that's been going around for how long, and I would love to know where it comes from, but like this kind of idea of just throwing the baby out with the bathwater, you know. It's like, no, we need to use technology. And that's what things like permaculture, you know, regenerative farming, lots of different things are showing, like, no, we can use technology. I mean, look what we're doing now. Obviously, we're having a cool conversation. Some people are going to listen to it. Some people are going to think we absolute twats. Other people are going to be like, when is the Matt Mulligan, Dave Gardner retreat thing happening? Because I want to sign up now. And we're like, yes. but it can obviously get very doomy and gloomy very quickly and very depressing. And again, we need to carefully explore those extremes, I think, and it's necessary to talk about it. But it's like, okay, what is the step forward? But an interesting thing that they talk about in the film, and that you kind of said it in your own words earlier, is that this whole time, the conversation around AI and technology has been like, well, what happens when technology or AI becomes kind of overcomes human strengths? So basically, when do they become better than us in some ways? And the dude just flips it on its head completely. And he's like, dude, it's not about when they overcome our strengths. It's when they overcome our weaknesses. And it was just like,
yeah.
You know, and they're like, that happened a long time ago, because all, you know, the apps and all these things were designed with a very, very, very clear understanding of human psychology and how vulnerable the human nervous system is. And it was made specifically to, you know, basically get as much attention as possible and make it incredibly addictive. And we know that now. Everyone knows that, and it's out in the open, you know.
But it's interesting there that the knowing of it hasn't changed the thing, because again, so like I feel really blessed in the sense that without going into detail, there, you know, there's been a great familiarity in my personal experience with addiction, and I'm really blessed by that experience because it's just enforced a certain sense of awareness, basically, around this kind of thing. Now, what makes me a little bit nervous at times is that it feels like the term technology is becoming synonymous with social media.
Mm.
Technology is part of the course of being a human. Humans make technology. We started doing it, you know, on the planes. We're going to keep doing it. We're going to like make tools. The question is whether those tools are empowering for the lives we want to lead or not. My answer to that is like on the social media front, I don't think it is. I think its opportunity for empowerment is present, but is very, very small compared to what the damage that it can do. And you know, I'm speaking there only from my own life experience. I use social media. Social media is a necessary evil for me to run my business life. If I could walk away from it tomorrow, I would do so.
Yeah, totally. Me too.
And I also do, you know, like I have to minimize that engagement because there is just so much in the world that my mind tells me I need to know. That's bullshit. 99.9% of things I just don't need to know.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And it's amazing that, you know, you say like we know these things now, and we know how addictive information is. This you know, this like craving for this bite-sized knowledge hits or whatever they are, which we know the kind of neuroscience behind it as well now, in terms of what's going on with the dopamine cycle, etc. And I mean, what these people are trying to do is propose and find ways to completely change, you know, the programming of it, basically, and the structure of it, because it is pretty much inhumane, you know. That's the kind of the summary of it. And like they're saying, they're just like, if you don't need to be on it, and what does that even mean, you know? But they're like, they're just like, delete it, get off it. You don't like, you know what I mean? But we are on it, and I feel like it can be. I have instances where, you know, it really can be used. And for me and you particularly, it is very much, it's what we do, and it's a professional sense. There's a, it seems like it's where the people are, you know.
But I guess, man, like, and maybe this is like what's interesting. There is interesting stuff here for sure. But then, like I wonder if what is perceived of what you put out in the social media world is really, like, again, speaking for myself, I keep my actual social media engagement per week down to below 2 hours. And I have to be really rigid in the way that constructs, because it's so easy for it to become something else. And my life hasn't fallen apart. My business hasn't fallen apart. So I think actually, like for me, there's a really disempowering idea doing the rounds right now that is like, well, yeah, it's really shit, but it's here and it's here to stay. So better, you know, if you can't beat them, join them. And I think if you're gonna like go with that, then really worth setting very clear intentions and objectives for like how and why we are using it in those ways.
Yeah.
I've had it a lot recently with you know, like students or fellow practitioners and friends saying like, I just don't have time for my practice. I just don't have time. Well, 20 minutes a day on Facebook, there goes your time.
Yeah.
That's it, man, it's going. But you know, the idea that it has become some kind of like necessary part, because I won't know what's going on. I think I've got to call bullshit on that one.
Yeah. Totally,
Like,
man.
I haven't seen anything you've put out on social media in a great many months, because I go on to check my messages and to make posts.
Yeah,
And nonetheless, I don't feel like I've missed out. Here I am chatting to my mate Dave. So
exactly.
all is well.
Yeah, yeah,
I
for
think
sure.
the direct emphasis, I'd love to see a shift back to an emphasis on direct communication coming out of the pandemic, because we've gone into this weird spread mode where you're like, I just tell the world. I put it in my little Facebook and Instagram shop window, and then the world knows about it. Man, I prefer the one-to-one.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Definitely, man. And so like here's an interesting thing that I've found, and you were doing online stuff before uh the surge. And I don't know, you've done a mixture of live and pre-recorded stuff. Um I've just found it so cool, man. Like is a Zoom conversation it's like a real conversation in the flesh, but it also kind of allows for other kind of things to happen. I don't know how to explain it. Like particularly in teaching movement, it's like you've really got to adjust certain things. And people are the I would say the biggest thing that I've found is people are in their own homes most of the time, and they feel very comfortable to be in their own home. So they move, they have less inhibitions. They don't feel like maybe some kind of pressure about like being in a room with people, or having like the teacher be right there. And there's been an emphasis, at least I've tried to channel it in this way, on kind of self practice. Because yes, we're here in the screen and like we can communicate and coordinate, but at the end of the day, it's like then coming back away from the screen and you're in your space doing your thing. I don't know how.
Totally, man. I hear everything you're saying there. Like, so I'm very blessed in that it just made sense for me to move into a lot of online work, because there was interest for about 18 months before the pandemic. But, the pandemic undoubtedly has kind of accelerated and shifted that process. But I think you've just put your finger on it, but I think online forces, it's a shared practice. If it's live, it's a shared practice in which, it's two individuals self-practicing and sharing that. Because if I try and operate online in the same way that I would when I'm in a room in shared space with someone, it just doesn't compute in the same way. It just doesn't work. But because it doesn't meet reality where reality is. We're not in the same space. So like, if I'm not adjusting content in that way, it just seems nonsensical. But that sense of like, what struck me is that I really didn't believe in online to begin with. I thought like, who's gonna want to go with that? If you can have in person. And I stand by the fact that I think most of us would agree that if you're really looking to get to the depth of some material, then being in a shared space is glorious. But nonetheless, the actual capacity for learning online is far greater than I gave credit for initially. And as you say, there's these magic other aspects to it, which I would never have foreseen. Just, for one thing, as you say, people being more comfortable, but also the profound limitation, even of just only being able to see from, a single angle. It creates a need for creative solutions to
Mm,
that, so like, actually, the whole way of formatting material for me has changed, through the online process. And I think I'm only just about to leap now into a first kind of long-term pre-recorded content thing, releasing the floor work and acrobatics course next week. But I think that the idea of like sharing practice online, one-to-one live, that is something which I've buzzed off way more than I thought I would, because, you know, yeah, as it requires something different.
Yeah, yeah, totally. It requires exactly. So, I mean, now you're in Manchester, and
Dave, I'm gonna have to pause for literally 1 sec, man. I
cool,
need 60 seconds of attention. Give me
no
one.
problem. So,
Seamless.
seamlessness is what we are talking about. So, you're in Manchester, and you know, I'm wondering what the, you know, huge football culture there, which I want to jump into a bit as well, to talk about one of our favorite human beings, old Jurgen Klopp, which
Jurgen.
you
Oh,
wouldn't utter
yeah.
in that city. You wouldn't say that too loud. But like, I don't know. I mean, is there quite a big demand and interest in kind of alternative movement practices? It's obviously a big city. Um,
Yeah, I'd
because
say, sorry, go.
yeah, one of the things that I've just like, I think to a certain degree struggled with in South Africa, and like when I talk to a lot of my older teachers, like particularly I had Simon Borg-Olivier on the podcast, and you know, they started out like practicing in these community halls, you know, and like there was like a donation and people actually did like donate, but it wasn't like even for the teacher, it was like for to keep the community hall going. And there was, in a way, there was alternative movement practices happening. Like there was a dance class, and there was a yoga class, and there was a capoeira class, and the kids came in, and there was and I was like, I always loved him telling me those stories and how people used to just practice in these community spaces, and how that's changed, you know, over the years with schools and studios and universities and whatnot, retreat centers, you know, things becoming a bit more popular. But yeah, I was wondering what it's like, you know, in contrast to the online world pre-lockdown, you know, and what do you think it's going to be like going
Yeah,
forward?
I don't know. I mean, Manchester is standard in the sense that, you know, we're the third biggest city in the UK after London and Birmingham. So there's a great many millions of people here. You know, the numbers just show that if you've got, however niche you're offering, however alternative you're offering, if you've got those kind of numbers of people around, there'll be people who are, you know, buying what you're selling, who are
Mm.
picking up what you're putting down. So in that sense, there's certainly, yeah, you know, there is a culture of alternative practice around. However, I've really noticed that there's been a shift, and I don't know if it is social media related or if it's just that there's more of an emphasis on business these days. But like there is a sense in which there's a lot of kind of short-lived flash in the pan alternative practice things that kind of arise and fall away, and that's very different. You know, I grew up in Oxfordshire in the south of England, and there, because, you know, unlike somewhere like London or Manchester, because there wasn't nothing was going to be huge, you were never going to make something absolutely massive. There was a kind of authenticity to people who were involved, because, you know, you knew that you couldn't make any money from setting up a dance class, so you had to really love dance to do that. And as a result, you know, you did have, as you've mentioned, you had these very community spirited places that were community first, business second. Now, a shift that I've noticed, not only here in Manchester, but also generally in smaller places, if I go back to where I grew up, it's the same there now as well, that it feels like because you can make a business out of movement, or you can make a business out of yoga these days, because that is possible, it feels like it's slightly changed the game, and the emphasis more quickly perhaps falls on money than love. And I'm not going to like pass judgment on that, because it's not it's not so healthy for me to do so, but I think that it makes me a little sad to see less opportunity for very authentic people with a dedicated practice to have a platform for just offering what they love.
Mm.
Um, yeah, but the flip side to all of that is that, and again, I have to kind of put my cards on the table as a kind of all-out hippie here and say that I just do think that if you found something that genuinely empowers you, then it will empower other people. And if you are offering that in a reasonable way, it's been true to my experience that you magnetize the right,
Yeah,
the
yeah,
right opportunities at the right time.
totally. Yeah, I'd definitely agree with that, man. Um, yeah, for me, it's been so interesting, looking outwards a lot. Like in South Africa, I mean, I've got teachers here and places that I would go, and I really, like, um, I made the most of that, I feel. But ultimately, I, was looking overseas, like, okay, cool, let's go to India and do yoga. Let's see what that's about. Let's go to Europe and dance and see what that's about. Let's go try martial arts in Brazil and see what that's like. And these teachers in America and whatever. And, I've been incredibly fortunate and privileged and hardworking to do that. And I'm incredibly grateful for it. But yeah, I mean, I was just like, I mean, Europe, like B12, for example. I mean, you've got a week or no, a month of like
Yeah.
just fucking jam-packed workshops and teachers, and it's like, dude,
Welcome to the
that's
market.
mind-blowing, man. That's mind-blowing. Like, we don't have that here. That doesn't exist. We're trying. There's been a few things, but not on that scale, and that well supported, and yeah, that blew my mind. That really blew my mind.
I think as well, there's something here, man, where you've got to work with what you've got locally as well, because, again, like Berlin, wonderful place to, I'm blessed to have spent a lot of time in Berlin, and, B12, fantastic festival, absolute, like all sorts going on there. And yet, if nature's your thing, be where you are. And so I think, like anywhere that a human might find themselves, it's going to have pros and it's going to have cons. And, it's an absolute classic one. My partner and I, we're looking to move out to the country shortly. And it's a big debate for us. If we want more of the nature, we'll be less connected to human culture. This is a classic, but you make your choice, you get on with it, and you figure that one out.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and I mean, for me, the vision is to bring people here, to experience this place and its history and its environment, and to make things happen here. Because I mean, I love this country. I love the story. I love what we can learn from it, and the same goes for the rest of the world. Like, this can be all very, very cool, and
But I think you do yourself down a bit there, man, as well, because but I think it really benefits a place when there's a person or people who are dedicated to the spirit of that place and being like an entry gate to it. So I think I consider you in a sort of class of people I know who are, I think of you as like connectors, where you're like very amiable and able to bring people, speak to many different kinds of human from many different kinds of background or place, and then able to bring them to something.
Well, that's why I called you a fellow human, because that's the way
We've come full circle.
I
Yeah.
see and
Yeah, yeah.
experience you.
Yeah, there was just I needed this conversation for the degree of understanding.
So talking about connecting people and creating separation. So like we said, you're in Manchester, so we're both people being like, what are these two hippies are also enjoy football? What, and we can maybe talk about
guessing, man. The human being's a complex animal, and Yeah, it's important to integrate different aspects of ourselves.
I mean, who doesn't love Mo Salah? How can you not love Mo Salah? You know what I mean?
How can you not? I got a picture on WhatsApp. So for anyone who doesn't know, Mo Salah, I mean, that's criminal if you don't, but he's the striker for Liverpool Football Club. And there's a friend who I go running with on a regular basis before lockdown. One weekend, I got a picture from him on WhatsApp of him basically having breakfast, like hugging Mo Salah at a breakfast bar. Yeah,
I'm gonna
like,
pull that up right now.
that's the kind of thing which makes me just be like, I need to be in, I need to be in the north of England. It ups my chances.
There we go. There we go.
Yeah. See, there you go. If you're gonna get like sudden moments of being like, right, my mates, I'm one step removed from Mo Salah, then I must be making the right kind of life choices.
Yeah. But okay, to Mo Salah actually is doing some pretty incredible things. I think that's the point. The way he holds himself as a human, his story is just insane. I mean, I don't know how much you know, but like, you know, as a kid, 4 hours or 8 hours, 4 hours there and back to his training, 8 hours every day, like
Yeah,
from
man.
nowhere in Egypt, you know, to another nowhere town in Egypt, like outside Cairo to train and what he
Man,
does.
the stories, I love these stories where it gives people like a human flavor of what's possible. It gives you like something to connect to where you're like, wait, he did it.
Yeah,
He did it.
dude, and Sadio Mane is probably even more crazier, you know, from a tiny village in Senegal, like with a couple hundred people. His
Used to
fo-
be, yeah.
his
One of the first jobs at his training ground was like cleaning the toilets, and the degree of
Yeah,
like humility. Man, I've got to say, I think that there's a lot going on right now in terms of, like it's been reported since Mane became striker for Liverpool. Reports of racist incidents in Liverpool have declined.
yeah, right, and Islamophobia with Mo Salah.
Yeah,
And well, they both Muslim actually.
and
So
this is like the sense of inspiring personal stories that can make a genuine difference on the world stage. We
yeah,
need more of this, man. And
and
that, by
and
the way, is what won me to football. I'd been completely cynical about football for a good decade.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Stuff happening here.
and the thing is, like, like, it's what we were talking about with technology. You know, it's like, how do we want to use these things? Look at what Mo Salah and Sadio Mane are doing in those countries for those people. These are just two human beings who are doing like amazing things. How many footballers are multi-millionaires and could be doing this stuff, and they're starting to, because they realize how much influence they have. Like, dude, Marcus Rashford. Have you seen
Yeah.
what he's doing in?
Dude, I mean, you can't be living in Manchester right now and not, he's like the new king of England, man.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
So
literally, the Marcus Rashford is now known in Manchester as the king of the North. He is like, yeah,
well, yeah, I mean, it's good stuff. So what I wanted to get to though, right? You're in Manchester, but you're a Liverpool supporter, which is like crazy.
I am indeed. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Criminal. I can walk from the room I'm in now to the Etihad Stadium, uh, and yet I couldn't face being a Man City supporter.
Right. Um, but we've been chatting a lot about it, and someone like Jurgen Klopp, um, who it's like a lot of people be like, oh, what's his secret? You know, why is he so? What is it about him that he's? And it's, I don't know. I just find him like he's so childlike. You know.
Oh, I think, man, here's part of the secret. Like he lived. He says it himself that like basically he had a child, I think, when he was 18 or 19, and then basically his whole experience of football was on top of responsibility as a human.
Hmm.
And he's always said that football is ultimately a game, and he said this at the start of the pandemic. It's a game, and from time to time, even if that game is your life, as it is for him, there's human issues are going to take front and center stage. And I think that is so wonderful, man, because it immediately places football as something that's not like escapism, you know, it's as something which, like, if you've got people at the head of those kind of organizations who are saying, let's all remember it's a game, let's remember it's a game, suddenly that game has more power to, to inspire positive change.
Yeah. And then at the same time, like, he I don't want to say he takes it seriously, but he does what he does so well while knowing it's a game. And I think it's that kind of like dispassion, non-attachment, that's such a key concept to embody and to practice.
So for me, that, you know, there's a phrasing that sums it up, which is to, like, not take ourselves too seriously, but to take play very seriously. It's like, you know, again, to come full circle with what we've been talking about with, like, you know, this spirit of game. If you're going to invest in a game, play it fully, but it's still playing, you know. And this, I think Jurgen Klopp is the epitome of that for me.
Yeah. And again, why I said fellow human, you know, he embraces humanity. He embodies humanism so organically, you know. He's just like, he's so human, you know.
Wonderful, man, wonderful.
And I think that's what it's about. It's like that humility of understanding that you're an animal and you know, we're not perfect and we're going to make mistakes, but if we can embrace that, then there's a sense of joy that can come to this experience.
You said it. And yeah, I mean, to be honest, if Jurgen Klopp was even if he wasn't embodying all of what you've just mentioned, I think I'd take one look at his face and still just fall in love. He's just, you don't often see people who can be that like playful, full of humor, clear kindness, and yet able to absolutely ass kick throughout.
Yeah, it's like the Jedi, right? That's the point.
Dude, exactly. Jurgen Klopp is a Jedi. Job done.
Yeah.
Nice, Dave. I think I may have to
wrap it up. Yeah, I was gonna say, it reminds me of we'll just wrap it up on this point to close it.
Finishing with Jurgen Klopp as a Jedi is
yeah, I think that was actually as good as it gets. But it just reminds me of doesn't matter. We'll talk about that another time. Save it for
nice. Cliffhanger. I love a cliffhanger. Everyone loves a cliffhanger.
I'm right now, all I've got is Jurgen Klopp, you know, doing backflips with a lightsaber in his hand. So that's enough for me.
Let's leave it with that. It works for me.
But brother, thank you so much. It was wonderful. And
man, thanks for inviting me, and beautiful to have the opportunity to sort of share a dialogue in this way.
Totally, man. And I look forward to getting you down here when we can, when that all happens.
Let's watch this space, man, as we're all doing right now. But
exactly. All right, brother. Thank you so much.
Good to see you, man.
You
Peace.
too.
Well.